So this session is about excuse me, Google Identity Toolkit. So I'm Jack Greenberg. I'm a product manager at Google, working on the accounts team, the identity team. And so these are some tools we've been putting together for developers to help make authentication easy to implement on their own site. So it works. Okay. So we have this kind of, I think a lot of us in this room have a goal to try to eliminate passwords. We know they're bad for security, bad for usability, and so we're trying to find something better. So I think how I structure this is that talk about a little where we've been, talk about what we've learned from those experiences, and then talk about what we're trying to do with Identity Toolkit and more broadly as well, just in terms of themes, UX patterns, that sort of thing. And it just froze. Okay. So first of all, which apps and websites are we talking about? I'm trying to talk about patterns, security models, that sort of thing that will work for a variety of apps and websites. But there are still some exceptions we have to kind of put off to the side for right now. Certain apps are going to be tied very tightly to a single IDP. So if this is like an internal corporate app for an enterprise, or if this is even some consumer apps, I think there's one called Soch, which it's completely based on using Facebook user data. So the only IDP they're really going to use is Facebook. It doesn't make sense to use anything else. And then some apps are going to have more strict regulatory or security concerns. And I think everything we're going to talk about is still applicable, but you may need to add on additional things on top of it. Make sure that the account is of a certain strength, more than kind of a base consumer app level security, and satisfy any regulatory concerns. All right, so passwords, kind of where we started, right? So number one, which I hope I can kind of get out of the way pretty quickly, is usernames are terrible. And when I say usernames, I don't mean email addresses, I don't mean phone numbers, I mean something that you just created for this site to identify yourself. From all of our usability studies, it's really terrible because there's no, you show up to the site after you haven't used it for 6 months, and you have no idea where to even start, right? Maybe we'll get to the part that you don't know your password, but now you don't even know how they refer to you. So we're really pushing the fact that let's just use an email address, or let's use a phone number, something that works from site to site so that users can at least get started, get the process started without having too much trouble. Right, passwords, I'm not even going to go into this too much. They're hard to remember. Typing is annoying, so this is becoming more and more of an issue as we talk about mobile. Right? So typing anything on a keyboard accurately is going to present a problem. And then a big theme kind of since the beginning of the internet has been we do password recovery based on an email recovery message. So it's essentially out of band, right? So you put in your email address, they say, oh yeah, you have an account, we'll help you reset your password, look over here. It's kind of, right, look through the other door. And honestly, it works pretty well. It's not entirely usable. So I want to talk about a technique that we're trying to push for avoiding this. And then, I should also, for a second, on the email messages, it's not the best security, right? So just the fact that you still have control of your email account, well, that's kind of a moment in time, right? How do I know that I control that? I didn't just hack the email account, and now I want to get into every single other one of your accounts, right? So let's see if we can expand it from a one-time check to a more ongoing check. And then, of course, password databases get hacked. This really talks about password reuse, that if I have an application, I might not initially think I'm affected when I see a big hack happen to someone else, but really those users probably use the same password on your site too. So you should be worried. That's actually, I think Eric can say that a lot of our Google hijackings start by they got your password somewhere else and they're going to try it to see if it's your Google password too. And then the simple email and password, there's usually no risk-based challenges. Now, I'm not saying you can't implement on top. I'm just saying that the tradition is that you spin up a Drupal site or a Django site or what have you, and it's just the username and password. There's no additional checks. Okay, so then we came to federated login, and this we've gone through many iterations. So I showed the OpenID box as well as kind of Facebook Connect when it launched, and then and now sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google, those sort of things. So I think we learned a lot here. So I'm ignoring the type in your URL. They're generally simple. Click the button and you're in, right? It's a great story, right? And they're generally secure. You're relying on a company that has hundreds of security engineers protecting these accounts. So if that's all you're doing, it's great. So I say simple and secure in isolation. In a second, we're going to talk about how if you add this to your existing password, or if you do 2 buttons, or if you do 5 buttons or 10 buttons, you may have to rethink some of these benefits. You may not have made things simpler. You may have made things more complicated. And you may not have made things more secure. You may have made things less secure in some sense. All right, so I've already gotten into this a little bit, but what have we learned from the password to federated login experiences? So this is what I was just talking about, right? So a lot of sites, I would say most sites that have federated login don't only have federated login. They have your password box over here. They have your federated login options over here. And so what a lot of the problems happen is when how do they work together? If I create a password account with jack@gmail.com, but my Facebook account is also jack@gmail.com, are those going to be merged? Are those going to be 2 different accounts? If they're merged, how securely are they being merged? Maybe I use a junky password. So I'm going to try to dive into these in more detail. But side by side, we shouldn't just assume it works. Okay. This is a new trend I wanted to kind of point on, and it's because, and this is password recovery as login. So essentially, you don't actually have a password. Every time you want to log in, we'll send you an email and click on the link and then you'll be logged in. Or we'll send you an SMS and every time you want to log in, we'll send you an SMS, click the link, enter the code, and you're in. This sounds ridiculous, that it sounds very complicated. Why would you ever want to do that? The reason is because once you get a session started in a mobile app, usually you don't re-auth that or have any need to because it's a long-lived session cookie token on that device. So this is an example from WeChat, which is a very popular messenger plus additional features app in China and Asia. And you can just log in by doing SMS to every new device. Okay. And then the big kind of elephant in the room is that password only is still very common. There are, I think one of the quotes I was hearing from people that work with startups a lot is that they consider themselves having a couple options. They can either do federated only, they'll only do Facebook, only do Google, or they'll just create their own password system. So we want to be able to help them. And then, so that was the password piece and kind of trends. So what about the federated login? So users, because we've added these buttons beside the password field, they're now being asked questions like, how do you want to authenticate? Which I'd argue is not always an easier question than what's your password. So do you want to authenticate using a password? Do you want to authenticate using Facebook? Do you want to authenticate using your Amazon credentials? Do you want to authenticate using LinkedIn? It's not something you necessarily remember 6 months after you signed up. I think this is also a trend that many of the sessions here I've talked on is what about these permissions pages? What are the privacy implications? Clicking that sign in with Google button, what does that actually do? And so we need to make sure we still work to clarify these things. And I think some of the trends like direct identifiers and OpenID 2 are kind of coming back, and we'll see kind of if they succeed, but they're coming back for a reason. And then also, so if I'm logging into, for instance, opentable.com using my Facebook credentials, what happens when I delete my Facebook account? Do I just lose my OpenTable account too? What's my recovery option? And I think this is something that you don't think about on that day you add the sign in with X button, but you think about when you start to have angry users. And then developers. So again, I already mentioned this, that it's still the default to use username and password. If you're going to start a Drupal site, you're going to click on the user management module or whatever it's called, and that's your login system. Okay. And then this is the edge cases we'll get into in a little bit, but you just don't think about every scenario, and I'm not saying that developers don't want to. I'm saying there are hundreds of these edge cases, and maybe you get the abandoned account one I just described, where the user deletes their federated account, and so you've solved that. But maybe you didn't figure out you didn't think about the same email create 2 accounts or merge case. And so this can also have security implications. It's not just usability. So together, it's there's a lot of stuff to think about when we talk about federated login and how to do a better job. Okay, so now where are we going? So what is our solution to this? That sounds like a big mess, but I would still argue that it's a problem worth tackling. Passwords are that big of a problem that we really should give this a try. Okay, so I'm just going to show some demos of how our most recent toolkit works, and then walk through exactly the steps to make it that we built up to make it work like that. Now, hold on here. Let's see if this works. Live demo. Okay. So I'm just going to go to one of our demo sites here. And let's say I'm Sarah. I use this app every day. I just want to log in. We want it to be like this. Excuse the internet speed, but welcome back. You're in, okay? Or let's say I'm Nikhil, and I've never used this service before. We want it to be like this. Come on. We just created an account. Welcome to this new app, Favnum as we call it if you can't see. You're in. Okay, so now let's walk through exactly what are the pieces that made this happen, that made us do one-click sign-in and one-click sign-up. So the big trend that I'd like to talk about is identify the user, then figure out how to authenticate them. It seems very straightforward, but it's something we're not doing. So we did it with username and password, right? We said, what's your username? What's your password? And so now I'd argue we should still try to think in this same way for when there are multiple authentication options. That just, who are you? And we'll figure it out from there. Okay? So if you're Sarah, you already have an account. Let's prompt for your password. So I'm going to get started slowly. Just let's say this site is just a password site. The technique works just the same, right? Or let's say I'm Nikhil. I don't have an account. So let's prompt me to make an account. Get a new password. All right, so now let's make it a little harder. So now Sarah has an account, but she used sign in with Google. That's okay. This works, right? Sarah at Comcast.net, route her to the Google sign-in flow. It works just fine. Okay? So the idea is that no matter how the user authenticates, by identifying them first, you can get them to the right place. You shouldn't have to ask the user how they authenticate, because you should already know as the developer. It requires a little bit of extra work. It's pretty simple when we actually got down to it. Okay, so identify the user, then get them authenticated. But what about new users when it's not just password, right? Now we're talking federated login. In this case, we're saying we might have to go back to what some of us call the NASCAR screen. The idea is that it has a lot of brands on it, right? It has the Facebook brand, the Google brand, LinkedIn brand, the Twitter brand. I'm showing a simple case here. But so for a new user, you identify they don't have an account, then maybe you give them options for what they'd like to do. Maybe they want to use Facebook to sign up. Maybe they would just want to create a password. They don't like those IDPs for whatever reason. Or this is what I kind of alluded to earlier, is that we'd like to talk about something called, if there's a fast email verification. So for a given email address, like Nikhil at Gmail, we can use Webfinger or just kind of look at the domain, and it's obvious this person can use sign in with Google. Right? It's obvious this person has mail hosted by Google, which sounds duh, but it's actually very useful. And so we as a developer can say, oh, Nikhil at Gmail, yep.
I just have a question on this whole approach. Does this mean you would, I could just type in a username, and the system would try to detect where to route the user for authentication? But that means I can use it to check what accounts are valid.
Yes.
As you can on tons of ways on Facebook.
So I'm not saying you don't have to take precautions to make sure people aren't scraping your whole user database. You do,
Okay.
but
So I could just start typing in things to determine whether the current user account is valid.
Which you-
Because it would then ask me for authentication, so I know that the account is valid.
So
you could go to the sign-up
sure.
form of the website.
If you do forgot password, you're going to get the same thing. I'm saying,
Just trying to make sure I
yep,
understand.
absolutely, yes. So at a small scale, I'd say yes, that's how it works. At a big scale, I'd say let's talk about precautions to prevent abuse and prevent more. Maybe make it so you can't do that more than 3 times, right? Yeah. So, okay. So for some email addresses, and I'd say actually for a lot of email addresses, we can figure out an IDP using various methods. And so then what we can do is what we've called fast email verification. We probably need a better name for it, but it works. So the idea is that let's do a password reset every time. Just like I talked about with that WeChat example, right? Where they send you an email and you click the code and you're logged in. But let's do it without sending an email. So the RP has the user's email address. We've already identified the user. If the RP sends that to the IDP and asks the question, is this email address signed in? I don't want any other information. I'm not asking for their date of birth. I'm not asking for their friends list. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to know, is this email address signed in to this user agent, whether it's a browser or a phone or what have you. And the IDP responds, yep or no. It's a very simple request. But it's a very simple request that's enough to do login because it's equivalent to doing that email loop, right? It's exactly the same if this is the IDP that hosts the mail. So we can get into the kind of how do you figure out the IDP that hosts the mail. But for Gmail is a good example, Yahoo, those kind of things, Hotmail, Outlook, it works. And so just some points on this is we can avoid the double consent, as we call it, because the email address came from, so what this first request is in our implementation, it's an OpenID Connect request and it has email scope, right? That's it. And so we can avoid showing the normal, this app wants to know your email address consent screen because, well, the user already gave the app their email address. We're not doing anything else. I mean, I'm not trying to say suppressing consent screens. I'm just saying if they already have your email, there's no sense showing the wants to know your email. Yeah.
So in this context, is there enough state left around the place to know session management at some point?
Session management in which context? In the context of the RP?
So in the context of from the user's perspective, it's like, I seem to have logged in a bunch of sites. When you hit the whole menu to log out, whatever the hell that is, is there enough context for you to be able to do anything about it?
So we need, I mean, this could blow up traffic-wise, but they could presumably run this check every so often, right? It's kind of, you don't necessarily have to just verify an email address once. And there's also a possibility, and I know you've worked a lot with this, but you could also do things like the big account changes service that we've talked about, or shared signaling in such a way to say that this. I thought you'd like that, yeah. There is more work to be done on the session side of things. And then the last little point here is just a side note, is that if there is public information, you might be able to do some optimization traffic-wise about, like I have a public profile on this social network, and so maybe you can give that in the request as well. But again, take care that if because this is such a simple flow and we're not showing a consent screen, then let's make sure we only give what is very, very clearly public and publicized, right, with that email address. Okay, so last point on this identify then authenticate technique is, wait a second, you keep showing these text boxes. You said you didn't want typing, and in the demo we just clicked on something. So that's where we get into this idea of an account chooser. And Adam's going to go into this with accountchooser.com and Google's experience with our own account chooser in about 90 minutes, I think. But essentially what we're doing here is we're trying to give a way for the user to select an email address instead of typing it, either using just it's like an autofill in some sense, right? So in accountchooser.com's case, is the browser is storing a list of the commonly used email addresses just on the device, and then instead of typing it, you can click one. It's just that. There's nothing else going on really. It's never sent to the server, that sort of thing. It's just to avoid that typing step. And so I just said, and account user. So our identity toolkit uses accountuser.com, and we think that as that gets adopted more, it will become a valuable place for sites to help users select an email address instead of type. All right, so I want to do the demos again, the exact same demos, but just kind of walk through, and I might have time because of that loading screen, for exactly what is happening in each step. All right, so I'm actually, you'll see we have a little handy delete account button here because Nikhil, remember, was that new user. So I'll delete his account. Okay, so we're back to where we started. So this is accountuser.com. These email addresses are just stored in the browser for ease of typing. Sarah is the existing user, so we'll start with her first. When she clicks on this, her email address is relayed back to the relying party. And then what's happening on our demo site is they're saying, oh, it's Sarah. Sarah has an account at our service. And Sarah, I believe in this case it was Sarah at Yahoo. So Sarah uses Yahoo as an IDP. So then the site redirected her to Yahoo to confirm that this was actually Sarah, to authenticate her, using an OpenID connector or OpenID 2, whichever flow they use. And then the site gets this assertion that, yes, this is Sarah, and she signed in. She can access whatever data this is. Our demo site just stores her favorite number, so we can put in 5. Okay, and so then the new user case is a little more complicated. Yeah, sure. Sarah is already logged into Yahoo. Yes, sorry. Thank you for. She may have seen. I don't know what that was. Yeah, I just closed it. Hope that's okay. So good point. So when the RP sent Sarah over to Yahoo to verify, I had just logged into Yahoo about 10 minutes ago, or 30 minutes ago. So the session was still good. Yahoo just said thumbs up. It's still Sarah. Okay. So let's do the new user case now. So remember, Nikhil has never used this app before. I just deleted his account, so it's like he never used it before. He has his email address in accountuser.com as well in this browser. When I click this, the email address is sent back to the relying party, the fab number. Fab number is then saying, hey, this is a Gmail address. This is a Google Mail user. So they're doing an OpenID Connect call over to Google, just asking for the basic scope of email and public, anything, just public stuff. And Google is saying, thumbs up. Nikhil is logged into his Gmail in this browser. You're kind of good to proceed, and returns that ID token. And then what the site is doing is saying, hey, I've never seen this guy Nikhil before, but I mean, he's authenticated, so let's get him started. And in this case, we don't need any additional information, so we just create an account. But if you, most apps are more complicated. They'd want to do kind of a more warm welcome than just welcome to FavNum at the top, which is our new user thing. But they might say, hey, Nikhil, let's get started shopping, set up your payment account. Or, hey, Nikhil, like, welcome, we want to get you into a promotion for the first, like for this video service for the first 90 days or whatever. They can do whatever registration steps they need on top of that. I don't know what this color thing is.
It comes up again, the third green option.
Was it?
Go away.
Go away, okay. So that's the new user flow. So let me go back again. Any questions on the pieces of the flow and how they work together? Yes?
So the email address is always a weird gray area because there are some people who think that it's private information. It's very suspicious. Like that it's private information. If everywhere you go. But it sounds like sort of underlying this is the implicit assumption or the assumption that you're doing implicit permission based on the fact that it's enhanced email address in the first place. Is that?
I would say the implicit permissioning is the email address, so I don't want to, I mean, these are for services. I guess I should have kind of maybe added that to my list. If you're not going to give your email address to a service, maybe we need some alternate option. Maybe you, I mean, the way to do it here would be to say, hey, this is my spam email address, or hey, this is some kind of pseudonymized, whatever the word is, like anonymized email address that I created and I give out to sites that doesn't really get back to me.
Yeah, but users never get into the flow associated with this, so everybody's expectation is it seems like you're saying, hey, if the email address was what you used as the username to kick this off, then you're implying that it was given to the site
Yes, we were saying that the email is given by the user to the site, either by typing or through account chooser. Okay, don't show this message again. All right. Sorry, there were a couple questions back there. No? Yes, in the back.
What if the user's not logged in yet?
To the IDP. So
Why don't you show demos?
I can show demos of that. All right, so let me sign out. That's a good point. So
Show Microsoft.
yeah, let's do that. Okay. I don't know if this is a new or existing user because we do test accounts all the time. So I'm going to add an account that's not in the account chooser. So I'll have to type. And let's say, what's the demo account?
Blah, blah, blah.
Actually, that would work. Okay, let's do blah blah at outlook.com. I apologize if you're the owner of this account. I'm going to. So you need to sign into Microsoft. And we try to make it as easy as possible, but
If you do Nikhil 911, that's a real account.
it's Nikhil. So I don't know the password. You gonna share that with us?
You do know.
I do know the password. Oh, is it? Oh, okay. We never share passwords. Never reuse passwords. Never share passwords. Nikhil 911 at Outlook. Oh, it's that one. No? Okay, it's the other one. No, it's not. I just tried that one.
Oh, uppercase.
All right, there we go. And it is an existing user because we have that little banner. So that's how it would look if you had to sign in and had to fumble with your password and had to reuse passwords, all that. So, yes, another question back there. Your corporate email. So I know, is Pam in the room? So Pam is actually exploring account chooser, the UX patterns for corporate use cases. I'm not an expert in this, but I believe usually there is a clear authentication source of truth. So you'd get the email back from account chooser. You'd say, oh, this is a blank enterprise user. Send them off to the SSO page. Or
Why don't you give an example with Google Apps?
I can use Google Apps. Okay. Do you have one that would use a non? Well, but it will do the Google login page, so it's gonna. Okay, it would work, but.
No, that's true.
You can
I
mock.
can give you an
Yeah,
enterprise.
You can
okay.
mock.
Does anyone have an enterprise one that's not
Yes.
Assemble enable Google Apps.
SSO?
There must be one in the room.
Do anything at
I don't think we're using
gene.com.
At gene.com? Okay. Person.com. I believe this is. Oh no.
So this is, we don't know that Google.
It's the so.
We need to know
We should, yeah, have to know a real email address. So we're trying to be smart with the kind of, again, trying to find a mail hosting IDP. And so one of the things that I want to mention at the end is that we're trying to make the Google part of this lookup easier, and we are going to, we're working on an API so that anyone can say, hey, is this a Google hosted mail? I don't think we've gotten it out yet, but that's something we're exploring.
I can give you an enterprise address.
All right, let me go back here. Add account.
Andy.Zmolik.
Oh.
Z-M-O-L-E-K.
CMOLEK.
Yep. At Enterprise. E-N-T-E-R. Yeah, there you go. O-I-D.com.
That does SSO?
Yes. And so.
It's a Google.
Oh, it's a Google account. It's not SAML. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So ping identities.
Okay.
Yeah, what's Andre's email?
Somebody's got to have one.
You guys are helping me fill my time. This is good.
Let's try to break into Andre Duran's.
I know it's Pete Dingle. I can take Pam's.
Oh, yeah. I can help with that.
Is it just ping.com?
Ping
Ping
identity.
identity.
That should go.
And we'll get sent over the SSO page.
And of course, Cassandra does support email hints. Yeah.
There's no email hint, but we wish that username field could have been filled in. So,
Yes.
okay.
John Bradley can come and talk about it for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so I have a little more to cover. Oops. How do I get back into full screen mode? All right, so I have left a big part of this out, is that authorization. Where is authorization? Authorization is important. I don't want to try to say it's not. I did want to focus on the login flow here. Our kind of best thinking is that limited permissions for sign in, again, especially in the consumer space, is really the way to go because users don't get scared away before they even see your service. Right? So we're kind of pushing this incremental auth model where get the user signed in, kind of communicate with the user, talk to them about the benefits of your service, why they need why you need their personal information, and then ask for it as you need it. So I just wanted to put up some examples of really great kind of use cases for personal data and authorization that would come after the login process. So, yep.
So as you start to accumulate all these attributes about the user, how are you going to keep them up to date? Specifically, let's say some of these email address changes, this is all based off of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of what's the protocol here, we are fully supporting OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 based flows. So you should be able to, again, talk to that IDP about update attributes. One minor thing that has come up internally for us in recent days is that do not use email addresses as primary keys to your database. The IDP will give you some sort of user number of some sort, and that is going to outlive an email address, right? So we have users who sign up for Google just to use Google Groups. So they need to make a Google account, maybe with their existing Comcast or Yahoo or Bell or whatever it is email. And then they later on say, hey, I want to try Gmail. So they get a Gmail address. So that just a minor thing there that primary keys.
One of the 100 edge cases.
Yes, one of the 100 edge cases. Yeah.
So just following on that question, so what happens when say a user is using their corporate ID like the PAM example that you gave, and then they switch corporations?
Yeah.
How do you keep their data in?
So the kind of what would happen in this example is that I'm going to say the account chooser may still have the email address. I don't think the person knowing their old email address is a problem. So they'd click on that. I'd click Jack at, let's say I worked at Ping, and then what would happen is you'd actually do it. I mean, so it's a regular IDP RP authentication flow. So then it would just say, nope, you don't work there anymore. Sorry. As far as what the RP still has, yeah, you'd need to make sure that your relying parties appropriately wipe or whatever restrictions you have on your data. That's kind of, you have that problem anyway, whether it's username, password, whether it's IDP, it doesn't matter.
No, but today, I mean, the point goes back to if you're using the email address as the login key or as the username, that needs to change, right? And if that's the identifier, and you're changing that, there could be a lot of things that are tagged with that. Right?
Oh, I see. So you're saying if I signed up for eBay with my corporate email address, I get fired, and then how do I access my eBay account? Yeah, that's a problem, and we've had that with Google users, right? That they use.
Some people would consider it a problem that would work, especially the IT admin.
Yeah. So okay, it's a dispute, but essentially, if it's something that's not related to your work at all, I'm going to take the easy case here. The person should be able to get into their eBay account. Presumably, this is not a work use case. I mean, the best bet would be that service, let's say eBay in my example, has a phone number for you or some way to reach you where they can do a reset flow. Otherwise, you're kind of out of luck.
TripIt has a good example of this. You can log in with multiple accounts and they all associate with the same one. So if one of those is cut off, you can still log in with another. But
Yeah, so I'm not sure to talk about merging.
There's more websites in the world who figured out how to do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's because this merging and linking is not easy. So I think.
Let's talk about merging.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. It's a stick or a carrot. So how do sites enable this experience? And so it should be easy. All the things we talked about, I mean, it makes it easier for users. That makes it harder for developers, unfortunately. But developers shouldn't need to be security experts, right? But we get these types of questions. I just went to Stack Overflow and was kind of looking for generic kind of developer problems, and like 150,000 views on how do you use bcrypt for hashing passwords in PHP. I'd argue no PHP like kind of app developer really needs to know that. That should not have 150,000 views, but it does because people are trying. I mean, they are trying to do their login system. All right, we are making progress though. I wanted to make sure I did mention OpenID Connect. So back in February, OpenID Connect was Don. What's the correct word? Ratified, certified. Blessed. It was OpenID Connect was blessed as the new OpenID Foundation standard, and this does make it pretty easy for developers to implement. It's based on standards like JSON Web Tokens, REST APIs, that sort of thing, which should make it easier to implement. Okay, but that being said, I want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. In the red shirt.
Is there any work going on for dynamic IDP discovery, for like say DNS, new DNS research record type or something like that?
So there is.
I flew to Toronto.
Yeah, there is WebFinger. I don't know how much is. I don't think it's being used a ton. We haven't really figured out the best way to do this. Like for instance, I mentioned that API Google wants to build, in that we want developers to be able to ask Google if we'd be a good IDP, and we'll say, hey, sometimes we would be and sometimes we wouldn't be. But that doesn't scale, and we know that doesn't scale. So we're not saying it's the solution. Maybe there's some way for the OpenID Foundation or one of these kind of working groups to set up a service where a developer goes to one place and they have this kind of, they can either query out from there and the developer just only has to make one call, or it's a shared service of some sort. The short answer is there's I don't know.
John Bradley.
John Bradley, yeah.
We are having discussions.
Yeah, it's a work in progress though. There's no solution. And so, but just back to, again, the same theme here is that username and password's still the easiest thing to do. You click it on and it, for most frameworks, and it just works. So that's a problem both in kind of developer mindset and also in terms of making tools easy enough to use. So that's where this Google Identity Toolkit comes in. I haven't actually talked about the tool, but the short story there is that we built something for developers that we think is relatively easy to implement, and that implements all these UX flows, this kind of handles the edge cases for them, all those sorts of things. So I wanted to step through in detail what those pieces were. So it handles multiple protocols. Our current version supports Google, Facebook, Yahoo, AOL, Microsoft, and PayPal, and I believe we have at least 3 different protocols represented. Google's OpenID Connect, Facebook's OAuth 2 based, and Yahoo's OpenID 2, although they're moving, I know. So we try to abstract that away until everyone gets on OpenID Connect, and it's easy. So what that means for the developer is they verify a JSON Web Token, and then they can start their session however they typically do, whether it's a session cookie or if it's a mobile app and they get a token. They verify the JSON Web Token, independent of provider, and can begin from there. So this is an example of one that we issue. It has the user ID would be that thing that you should use as your primary key. That will last email changes. The audience, is their developer's client ID as an Identity Toolkit developer. The provider we pass through in case the developer wants to know how the user did authenticate, whether it was Google, this person, this jsmith at Gmail, signed in with Google. It could be they signed in with Facebook. We try to pass that along in case it's of interest. They can totally ignore that if they don't need that. And then an expiration time and an issue time, and of course the email address.
So what does this mean to somebody who uses their phone now that's already logged into Gmail?
So in that case, the real what we've been going for is device locks and remote wiping and making that more secure.
I mean, for a few minutes, somebody's got access to actually build brand new accounts under your name anywhere.
And I would argue they already do. I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but I'm saying there's nothing new here. So we needed to do better on the device locking and making sure we can revoke things and wipe.
Well, yeah, and I have to change my password now pretty much.
Yeah, or
Because as my phone is right now, nobody can steal my password.
I'm sorry, can you explain?
I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Your password for what? For
Gmail, is it like there on my phone typed somewhere?
no, it's a OAuth flow. Yeah.
That's what I mean, but now they don't need it. When they get my phone, they don't need it to go somewhere else, right? My password.
Already,
The-
still today, way to reset your password on any website that allows email-based password reset.
So they have access to your email.
It has a Google login
Yeah.
button.
But I'm not saying it's a solved problem. We should say it's okay. I mean, we should always try to do better. Oh, there's another question.
What protocol you use for Microsoft?
I don't actually. Jin,
It's the fifth protocol.
It's a standard OS.
it's an OAuth2 flow.
Microsoft.
Yeah. I can't always keep track who's on OpenID Connect and moving to OpenID Connect and all that. So then that's the kind of protocol side of things, but the UX is hard too. I mean, these flows require different steps. There are showing error messages in all these different edge cases where you click no on the consent screen, or you can't access your Facebook account anymore, or you signed in with Google last time, but now you want to use Twitter. And all these kind of edge cases require messages and images and pages and all these sort of things. So we have pre-built widgets for native Android, native iOS, as well as web JavaScript, which works on mobile web as well. But we tried to lower that bar. And then edge cases. And so this is what there was some pressure to move on to earlier. Essentially, I tried, these are 3 of them. I won't remember them all right now. We try to have a rolling list and a chart on our team to try to make sure we keep track of these things. But some of the big ones are merging. So this is the case where I have a password for this site, for jack@gmail.com. Next time I come back and I hit the wrong button, if for some reason our identify then authenticate didn't work, and then they get an assertion from Google for jack@gmail. So what do? Do they just blindly merge them? We'd probably say that might be a bad idea because there could be a hijacking scenario where, so let's say that new IDP you have a bad password. I don't want to say which service you might have bad passwords on, but I think people realize that some services are more valuable to them and some services are less valuable to them. And so essentially what you're doing is if the RP supports the more valuable and less valuable, you always have an open door, right? Because 123ABC is your password at that less valuable one. So if someone figures that out, you don't want them to be able to access every RP. So the RP needs to say, hey, like we're getting a response from less valuable IDP saying to log you in, but last time you used more valuable IDP. Can we just double check that you're okay with this using the more valuable IDP? So merging is not a simple process. It requires these checks to make sure everything is still secure. Mutating is that email as primary key worry that we had earlier is that, again, email addresses change, phone numbers change. We need to use stable identifiers, which unfortunately is not always being done. And then the marooning is the case, again, where you no longer have access to your mail or no longer have access to your IDP account, and making sure you handle getting users into their account there, because turning off your Facebook shouldn't mean that you can no longer access your OpenTable account, right? Okay, so these are kind of the angles we're approaching the problem and how we're trying to make it easier from an implementation side and from a security point of view, usability. And then there's one last step is that, well, I mean, we're not just talking about new apps. We should help existing sites and apps do this as well. So we tried to work out a flow for this, where existing username and password sites can upload their users and then slowly roll out federations. So how this actually works is that, again, based on the IDP finger, web finger, whatever it would be, is that, hey, Sarah typically uses a password at my site. Now this site has migrated to Google Identity Toolkit and turned Yahoo to 10%, right? And so then what we'll do is we'll randomly start to kind of use Yahoo authentication for those at yahoo.com users until finally this site can feel confident that they'll probably never totally get rid of their password database, but they'll have a lot fewer, right? They won't have to worry about being such a big target.
Question for you.
Yep.
What do you mean upload user IDs and passwords?
Okay, so I should have explained the nuts and bolts here. So how we made this work from a toolkit side of things is for us to implement all this for the developer, we realized that we had to know this. Where's my picture of the funnel? Let's see if I can go back 30 slides. We had to essentially know where to send each. There it is. We had to know where to send each user. Google Identity Toolkit APIs are stateful in some sense, so that the developer doesn't have to implement this themselves. We throttle and make sure that this is not being abused for whatever purposes. And so when the client calls has an email address and says, where do I send this user? We have a lookup table to know where to send them. And in the case where it is a password user, we also have the password so that we can handle the complete authentication event. Ideally, there'd be no passwords there, but so it is.
And we could do things like capture protection against dictionary tags that unfortunately very few passwords.
Yeah, and like Andrew was kind of mentioning, like how do I protect these APIs against being abused? It's not just trying to figure out who is a user, but in the password case, I would guess that there's not I mean, it's not that easy to do things like protect against dictionary attacks and protect against all sorts of things. So we've implemented that on the APIs ourselves. Okay, I don't know if I can skip back. So that was pretty much it. If there are more questions, I'd be happy to take them. We also have our documentation on the developers.google.com site. Version 3 is available to try out. We'd always appreciate feedback. We have a forum, and you can email me. Oh, the question in the back.
What information are you retaining about me? Are you keeping a copy of every single identity that I send to you?
So this is, we think of this very much like a cloud service where the developer is our customer. We don't, and if the developer is storing some of their user data with us, but if the developer wants to delete that at any time, if the developer wants to change that or download that, whatever they need, it's their data. So it's our relationship is between us and the developer, and so does that answer your question? I'm not exactly sure.
Sort of, I was just wondering if you can choose is that a way of retaining information about me?
Okay, so the account chooser, just to recap, is just to make it easier to type email addresses. I mean, there's more, and Adam will discuss all the implications there. But the real purpose is to save the typing. And so where those email addresses are stored for the accountchooser.com example, at least, is on the device. There's no account chooser backend. It's just a static JavaScript HTML file that has the smarts. So your browser downloads the logic, and then your browser acts as this email storage. And then nothing is sent to an RP. The reason actually you saw that redirect was so that there's no data sent to the RP until you say, yes, on this site I want to use Jack at Gmail.
Is there a list of those edge cases you referred to?
We probably should, I mean, you have some of them, right, in your doc?
Yeah, how much do you really want?
I mean, yeah. How curious are you?
We're having to solve some of those same problems.
Yeah.
Do a Google search for Google Identity Research.
All right.
So Google Identity Research, we have a public site where...
Is it RP? I think it's RP best practices, right?
Go to the home site for that.
Okay.
So last count, the last time someone told me they printed out everything like from this site, it was over 1,000 pages. But if you go, we have the
Is it this one?
30
Integrated account
summary.
chooser? Yeah.
And then I think it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So scroll down to chapter 6. And then the
It's
good,
this
bad,
one.
the
So
ugly.
this has some of them.
And then go to RP account linking, middle left, and that has more. And then go to advanced notes in the bottom. Wait, up.
I think Eric's made his point here.
No,
Oh, up? Where is it?
Advanced notes bottom.
Oh, right there. Okay.
And there should be a table if you scroll down. I think there's one more.
It's very, no, there's no table
No,
here.
There's the super advanced notes. I'm sorry. Super advanced. And then there's a table. Not kidding.
Okay.
At the end, we determined that we could only figure it out through logic diagrams. It wasn't possible to predict them all just by thinking.
Yeah. All right, so there is a site full of learnings. I think we can probably update this with some references to our newest. Do you keep this updated? Okay, I will update it. Okay. All right. Any other questions? I guess we can get. Oh, there you go.
So, another question: is there a way for an RP to request the IDP or Google in this case to enforce a query for a password, or if the user has a second factor, ask for that second factor? Like, is there a way to get that?
I won't totally bounce it over to you. So Adam's. I mean,
We're not
so.
going to be able to answer all this. Can you go back to that same site?
Okay.
So click on view slide decks and videos password change. So a lot of questions do Google.
Oh, you do update this. Okay, this is updated.
So
Yeah.
The top one at the top, session strength and motivation.
So
the one before that, risky account.
This was last fall at IIW. Adam presented about things we're thinking about to try to give RPs confidence about an account, so that and there is a whole bunch of kind of ideas. Nothing is built yet, but we'd like feedback and advice about what kind of would be useful for RPs. I think many of the ideas in here were that using signals like, does this user actually do anything as a Google user, right? Was this account created 5 minutes ago and now they're trying to do abuse? Or is this really, I mean, it looks like it's a real user, so I should trust it more. We've been thinking about how to pass on those sort of signals in a privacy-preserving way.
And second factor?
I think that was also part of this doc.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, there is a. I mean, I do want to mention that we have been a little hesitant to say like there was a password prompt or be very specific because with FIDO and there are all sorts of things changing. So we don't necessarily want RPs to be saying I want a password prompt because maybe that's really not best. Maybe we want a security key click or whatever. So.
And if you can go back, there were also questions earlier about what do you do if the person's, if Google determines that someone's account was hijacked, how do we notify relying parties?
So this is, yeah. Andrew was talking about this a little bit, and we had another presentation at IIW about how do we help RPs when there is a case like we know a user was hijacked. How do we, again, in a privacy-preserving way, help these RPs that federate with us and tell them be careful with this user because they've had a big account change is what we've been using.
Gentleman's question about can't you get into everything once you have one?
Yeah.
These are also examples. We say the Google Identity Toolkit is more sophisticated than just about any RP out there, and there's still more to do. Right?
Yeah.
These are the types of things we think we can just add to the toolkit that will come for free for websites that happen to choose to use them.
Yeah. So we see the toolkit as a implementation of best practices and a way for developers to take advantage of all that without doing a ton of work. Okay. All right. Thank you.